Schumer? I hardly know her.
No.
Welcome back to Behind the Bastards, a podcast that just started the worst way a podcast can start. I think we can all agree.
I didn't like that. It was unenjoyable.
It's compulsive. Like Lee Atwater, I can't control it, you know?
Oh.
So you can't be angry at me for it, you know? Just like we can't be angry at Lee Atwater for all the people he hurt. That's the way it works. Anyway, I'm Robert Evans. This is Behind the Bastards, part 2 of our series on Republican strategist Lee Atwater, the guy who invented modern presidential elections. My guest today, as with the last episode, Garrison Davis. That's so that if there are any 2-year-olds in the audience, they can't spell your last name, Garrison. They don't know what I'm saying.
I was going to do this whole episode as another extremely successful political operator, Chuck Schumer, but then I realized I don't know what Chuck Schumer sounds like, so now I'm just stuck with these glasses falling off my nose.
I think it's something like, hoodly doodly doo, I'm Chuck Schumer. That's basically it, right?
I do not think that is how he sounds.
I think that's pretty close.
I've certainly heard him speak before.
Yeah, I think it sounds like that.
It's however you imagine like if somebody was made of stone trying to speak.
Yes, like that's exactly what I did. You're right, Sophie. Thank you for the praise. I appreciate it.
We'll return to this topic later, I guess.
Sure. Now, last episode, we closed out with our friend Lee Atwater.
Your friend.
Friend of the pod, Lee Atwater, has just done a fucking fake school election for his friend who, depending on the source, some say his buddy didn't even know that he was like putting him up for election until like this magazine comes out where he's like rating, he like mimeographs this fucking zine basically being like, he won this he's the funniest kid in school based on, this, it's unclear like how this ranking was done and, promising free beer on tap. He's got his little fucking student SS out kicking people, right? And the first part of this, the fact that he starts it with like this fake poll, basically, that he's handing results to people is noteworthy because fake polls are going to be key to Lee Atwater's adult political style. Now, today, we call a fake poll conducted by an independent pollster funded by a campaign or a dark money operation not legally connected to a campaign for the purpose of pushing a political agenda, a push poll. And what Lee's done here isn't quite a push poll yet, because the goal of a push poll is to propagandize a voter under the guise of polling them. So you call them and say, hey, we're doing a poll. If you were to find out that candidate X was a pedophile, would you still vote for them, right?
Amazing.
And you're not accusing them of being a pedophile, but also it makes people think about them that way, right? And it's usually, you can get a little more direct than that, but that's the basic idea, right? Is it's a poll where you don't actually care about the result. What matters is you're trying to subtly propagandize to people when their defenses aren't up because they don't think they're being subjected to a political ad, right? And it's not exactly what he does in high school with his friend because, again, he just releases the poll. But this is going to this is going to work so well that it kind of gets him. He's always a guy who's going to do a lot of what he does through different kinds of bullshit polls. And part of the reason why is that after this election happens, he notices that like kids that he didn't even know keep coming up to him and telling him jokes or like cutting up in class and then looking at him to gauge his reaction. One kid even wore a plastic display bottle of soap for an entire day. And they want Lee to see them because they realize that he is the guy publishing this list of the funniest kids in school and they want to get on the list. They don't realize that it's a completely bullshit list, right? Lee writes, quote, "It took me about an hour to realize they all wanted to get into the comedy ratings." So he keeps publishing the flyer and he expands it. He adds a Bad Breath of the Week award and he adds fake ads for a Dial a Slut service, which he claims is run by one of his female classmates. So as a kid, he's learned how to use the media to manipulate his classmates, to hurt people, to help a campaign. He's already figured this out, and he's like not yet 18, or just about turning 18.
Dial a Slut service?
He's a prodigy in the evil arts of politics.
Sir.
Yeah. He would later recall, "Nothing taught me more cleanly and clearly that people like to see their names in the paper, and people like to be number one at something. I always remembered that lesson." Now, he
also has discovered the inherent charm of the DIY magazine, which everyone, usually around 18, falls victim to.
Right, of course, everyone. Yes, absolutely, Garrison.
Kids love DIY magazines.
Some kids do, yeah.
Okay, well.
The cool kids and the Lee Atwaters. It's a real mixed bag. If you're mimeographing, you're going to go one of two ways. Lee himself was never featured in the paper that he put out. He wrote, "By not being involved, I could have a lot more fun with it. I learned back then that I was just going to cool it and stay out of the scene." So he's also figured out, I don't want to be in politics. I don't want the spotlight on me.
He wants to be behind it.
I want to be I want to be behind the spotlight, right? Focusing it on people.
He's like the Lauren Michael.
He's
of his school.
He's like a less evil Lauren Michael. That's right. Yeah. So the one area where Lee was weirdly positive and like weirdly ahead of his time was when it came to black musicians. When black bands would play at his all-white school, he would use all of his manipulative prowess to ensure that his peers weren't shitty towards them. His friend Debbie Carlson recalled, "He showed sensitivity toward blacks that he didn't always show to his good friends." And I think it's worth noting this is black musicians, right, that he likes. It's not like a general behavior trait, but he is noted by his white classmates as like he was like the non-racist one, right? Or at least the one who was most aggressively anti-racist when there was something he wanted to get out of it, right? I think that is like an important thing to add, that this is not just happening in a vacuum. He's not like seeing someone be racist and confronting them outside of this. It's specifically because I like this band, they're going to be playing at our school, and I don't want them to get embarrassed. Yeah.
No, it does seem to be like...
It is interesting, yeah.
One of the few things that keeps him from being like at the most evil that he could be is his like love of music and how that alters his like perception of like racial politics slightly, I guess.
What's interesting is it alters his perception of racial politics. But his politics are always very racial, and he gets really angry. The one thing that seems to bother him is when people call him out for being racist, for the racist things he does, because some of his best friends genuinely are black musicians, and he doesn't want to be seen as racist, but he wants to be allowed to campaign as one. And that's really it. The fact that he does seem legitimately offended when people accuse him of being racist while consciously using racial politics in a way that is undeniably conscious is really interesting to me. But we'll see more of that later.
Yeah, I would like to hear about that in the context that in which it exists in.
So he had gotten his parents to agree to let him go back to public school by laying out an ambitious plan for his future. He'd written them, "I think I would like to be a lawyer and maybe someday go into politics." He told them he intended to apply after graduating to the University of South Carolina, the Citadel, North Carolina State, and Wofford University. And that last one he didn't really want to go to, but it was his dad's alma mater. And so he adds it, again, it's part of this like manipulation campaign, right? You just can't turn that off. As I noted in the last episode, as soon as he's out of military school, he gets back to his old tricks. And in fact, he is more out of control than ever. His high school...
Really? Dial-a-slut service?
The dial.
Really?
That's not even like... His high school has an unofficial fraternity system, and he joins a fraternity who call themselves the Dark Horsemen. And I think you can tell what these dudes are like from that. Like,
No. I want to hear more about this.
Yeah, the Dark Horsemen.
I'm covering my drink even though he's dead.
Yeah. You want to cover your drink when they're mentioned. It's like fucking what
if
is
you say it 3 times into a Zoom call, they appear behind you.
Yeah, they'll fucking roofie you. Yeah. They viciously haze their members. When Lee is admitted he has to rub icy hot on his balls and then be paddled for hours, he has to get into like an hours-long slap fight with a friend where they're like really hurting each other. And like he apologizes afterwards, they both do, but like they're willing to do it to get into this club. And this is not uncommon for fraternities back then, although the fact that it's a high school fraternity is kind of weird and an example of like who Lee is. So they would pool all of their money to rent dance halls or warehouses and throw these massive parties for their high school. And when they couldn't afford liquor, Lee has a great idea for how they get booze, which is there's this stretch of road outside of town that's like the dating spot where like people will pull over to make out / fuck with their girlfriends, right? And, periodically the cops will come by. And so you'll like toss your liquor out of your car to like get away so they don't realize that you're like drunk and trying to have sex in a car. So he has his friends, they all go out to this spot and they start searching in like the brush around the makeout point, and they pull out all these half-full bottles of like beer and liquor, and they mix it together in a barrel, and then they fill the barrel the rest of the way with what is only described in my sources as purple juice.
This sounds rancid.
Yeah, it sounds awful. The resulting beverage is called Purple Jesus, and it did a spectacular job of giving teenagers alcohol poisoning. It just sounds like hell.
That's awful.
Oh my God. Mm-hmm. You love to see it. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I did much better. Yeah, because we would. I do feel very alien to this sort of stuff. Like I enjoy a cocktail every once in a while, but I'm not rummaging around. Like this is completely foreign to me. No, there was a period when I was like 19 or 20 where we got one of those like big things of just the raw Dr. Pepper syrup, and we would just add that straight to Everclear. Don't do that. Bad idea.
That hurt.
That sounds awful.
My stomach immediately hurts.
Yeah. Oh my God, what a nightmare. So you won't be surprised when I tell you that Lee's GPA was not impressive by the end of 12th grade.
Purple Jesus isn't really pulling through in the grades.
No, he's not doing great. Now, it's kind of an open question whether or not he's even going to graduate until the last possible moment. His psychology teacher comes close to failing him. And his psych teacher actually calls Lee's mom Toddy because she teaches Spanish at the same school. And as a fun aside, she gave her own son a D once and like wrote on the report card.
What a baddie.
She wrote on the report card, you need more discipline at home, like on her son's report card. So this teacher goes to Toddy.
But also, take accountability, my girl.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a bit, but
Ma'am.
yeah. So this teacher goes to Toddy and he's like, I don't know if I can pass your kid. And she's like, yeah, you should just do what's best. And he's like, yeah, I'll do what I think is best for the boy. And ultimately he passes Lee. Even though the grades weren't there, he decides that Lee, when he would talk in class, he was better. He participated more than anyone else in terms of like classroom discussion.
Sure.
He just, again, refused to study or do homework ever, right? And it's this is the fateful decision that will allow him to go to college. So, I mean, really, never show mercy to a student who's struggling, teachers out there. You know, that's the lesson of this podcast. No mercy to children. They'll turn into Lee Atwater if you give them a second's grace. So Toddy had resigned herself, partway through this year, 12th grade year, to the likelihood that her son would not go to college at all and would wind up working a menial job despite his obvious intelligence. Lee himself wanted to leave from graduation and immediately travel around the South with a friend of his who was a professional musician. And like this would be like a vacation, but I think it was also the idea was he was going to explore maybe whether or not he could make it as a musician.
Yeah. This sounds like a positive development for a kid like this.
If only. Now, again, it looks likely that this is going to be his path forward because he applies to the University of South Carolina and he gets rejected. And that's like not... No offense, University of South Carolina, but it's not like an Ivy League school, right? Like his grades are not good. He's getting rejected from like the state school.
Yeah.
And Lee keeps this rejection letter in his office for the rest of his life. The fact that he gets this is something he's got this weird sense of pride towards. But before he can start his trip, his mom pulls some strings and she gets him an interview with the dean of admissions to Newberry College because she knows the guy. And she knows her son. She's well aware of the fact that if he gets face-to-face with someone,
he's going to do well, right? Even though his like grades and admissions would get easily discarded.
Yep.
But he would be compelling in like an actual like meeting.
Yes, and she knows this, and she gets him the face-to-face meeting, and obviously Toddy's right. And the dean also seems to have understood Lee pretty well, and he kind of plays hard to get. Right? He repeatedly says, I don't think you have what it takes to handle this college, to be a Newberry man, right? And this flips a switch in Atwater's head. And so he becomes obsessed with proving the dean wrong. And so they make a deal.
It's a gamified thing, yeah.
Right. Now it's a deal. Now I've been challenged. So the deal is, if he can take 2 summer classes at Newberry and do well, he'll get admitted to the fall. And Lee takes and aces both classes, which proves that the only way to get him to actually work hard is to trigger his oppositional defiant disorder. That's the entirety of how this guy works, right?
What a brat.
He's like the Republican Party distilled into one man. It's just pure oppositional defiance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Lee enters Newberry in 1969.
Nice.
This is a tense year for America, for students in America at colleges in general.
A
lot's
No,
going
you're
on
right.
this year, but not for Lee. Newberry is not it's off the beaten path a little bit. It's not one of the schools that's going to be the center of things happening. Lee later described it as a pretty laid-back environment. The anti-war movement and the attendant protests had mostly skipped the campus over, and Lee doesn't find himself pushed into political activism immediately. Instead, he gets very into Greek life. And I'm going to quote from an article by Eric Alterman in the New York Times. Atwater and his fraternity brothers used to rent black and white pornographic movies and charge 50 cents admission. You can bet nobody asked for their damn money back on those flicks, he volunteers, sitting with his wife and parents in the family living room. We weren't like the guys who took your money and then showed a bunch of people horsing around in leotards.
Sorry.
He's just talking in front of his wife and kids. Yeah, we showed the best porno in college.
Sorry.
We didn't rip you off by showing you fake porno. No, nothing but real naked people fucking in our fraternity.
He opened a DIY porn theater.
He opens a DIY porn theater. That's how his fraternity makes beer money. It's pretty funny. Now, his frat is Alpha Tau Omega. And just for shits and giggles, I was like, I want to see what kind of reputation ATO has. I'm
sure it's great. I'm sure I'm going to learn some lovely things
Garrison. Here. It would be fair to say, in many schools, they are regarded as a party house. Just from stories in the last decade, I found an article about a chapter, the
last
ATO
decade?
Yes, just from the last decade. Because there's not a lot recorded from the 60s, right?
Yeah.
A lot of stuff. What's going to get sexual assault's not getting reported generally.
Sure.
But within the last decade, an ATO chapter at Muhlenberg College was suspended for hazing and life safety violations due to out-of-control drinking.
Okay.
UNC's chapter got suspended earlier this year for alcohol violations and financial malfeasance. The Ohio State chapter was likewise suspended this year for hazing and alcohol violations. I've also found multiple stories of brothers in different states being investigated for sexual assault over the years. Now, Lee is in college decades before these things go down, but cursory examinations suggest that the ATO it's had a long reputation as like, this is a party house, right? That's the case in Lee's day, and that's kind of the legacy of this fraternity up to the present day. This is a party house.
I feel like they got shut down at my college when I was in school.
I found a lot of stories of them getting shut down. This was literally just seconds of Googling, right?
Sure.
Just like a lot of ATO chapters get in trouble. And the fact that this would be a party fraternity is consistent with the stories Lee and his brothers would later tell reporters. He was known for staying up all night drinking, dancing, and singing, and then, in his words, would, quote, be the guy to wake up the day shift with a flip top at 6 a.m.
Sorry.
So he's like still awake, waking his friends up with a beer at 6 a.m, to keep the party going.
Never let the party die.
Never let the party die. Garrison, you remember when I showed you PCU? The classic 90s college film. It's a special movie starring Parliament Funkadelic, and ends with a P-Funk concert. Great film.
Yes, I do remember this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I found an article in the Newberry Observer that interviewed Carlos Evans, who is another ATO member and like an future executive at no relation, because he winds up as an executive at Wells Fargo. And Carlos's recollections make Lee's life in this period sound identical to the plot of PCU. Quote, Lee was always joking around and entertaining his fraternity brothers by improving crazy songs on his guitar, Evans said, which made him an ideal social chair for his frat. One slow weekend on campus, no football or planned parties, Atwater came across a band whose trailer had broken down on the side of the road. Already running too late to make it to their gig in the upstate, Atwater convinced them just to stay in Newberry and play there, thus creating an impromptu party. It's just literally the plot of PCU. It just happened to him.
Yeah, but his life feels like a lot of different movie plots.
Yes, his life is written by John Hughes. Like, I almost feel like there's a stranger than fiction situation here. He's like Will Ferrell in that movie.
I also wonder what his thoughts on Wild at Heart are. In terms of the Elvis blues, like dancing, performance, deception. Like Nick Cage's whole character in that has like
unfortunately
a
we'll never get
vibe.
to ask him, Garrison. Spoilers for where this episode ends. Speaking of spoilers, you know what can't be spoiled? is the
These
quality.
ads?
Yeah, the quality of our sponsors. There's no spoiling that.
Shelf life staple.
And
Yeah, that's right.
and here's our ads for 1-800 dial a slut. I'm
That's
still
right,
I'm still
that's
really
right.
bothered by that.
Yeah, 1-800 dial a slut.
As somebody
they did
who-
offer us a lot of money, Sophie. You know?
Sophie, sex work is work, actually.
I was gonna say
so-
as somebody I just don't like that he did it. I
don't like that he did
I
it.
love sluts. Sluts are some of my favorite humans in the whole world. Would be so cool if it wasn't him.
All right. We're back and we're talking about 1-800 Dial a Slut, our newest sponsor. I'm just happy to finally have a sponsor ethically that we can support. You know, finally we have a clean conscience. No longer doing the ads for Blue Apron or whatever. You know, just some honest God.
Are we allowed to say
people.
Blue Apron on the pod now, or
Why not?
that
Why
still
not?
getting bleeped?
No, I don't know. Maybe we'll see. So Lee's been interested, since high school in the political process, but previously it had been a game for him, purely a way to amuse himself. College is where he gets interested in and involved in real politics for the first time. And there are two stories about how this happened, right? And they're kind of divergent. I think there's a way to reconcile them. His frat brother, Carlos, says that, basically in his first year, his grades were so shitty that he had to go to summer school in order to not get expelled. And then, per an article in the Newberry Observer, while in summer school, Atwater secured an internship with a young senator named Strom Thurmond, who was 67 at the time.
This fucking guy.
He came back that fall, and he was a totally different person, Evans recalled. His hair was short and his dress conservative. Gone were the remnants of the hippie-saturated 1960s, Evans said. Atwater went from coming dangerously close to flunking out the previous semester to a straight-A student, and Evans said he became highly engaged in his political studies. That was the point when we started to believe that Lee had possibilities beyond being just a jokester and a fun guy, he said.
So Strom started politically grooming this guy.
Yeah. That is, every version of the story has that part. The question is what leads up to it, because Lee and his mom will later tell a different story. Instead of it happening in his freshman year, because he had to get summer credits because he was failing, in the summer of his sophomore year, his mom says she convinced Strom Thurmond to take her son as an intern, and that this ignites his love of politics and gives him direction for the first time in his life. Lee claimed, I decided that summer was time to get serious. Thurmond was by this point a Republican, and in a Congress that was still full of white supremacists, he was the one who was famous for being a white supremacist.
The most supremacist of the whites.
The whitest of the supremacists and the supremacistest of the whites. He and Lee got along very well, per the New York Times. Thurmond remembers a bright young boy of extraordinary energy and charm who, in 7 years, progressed from college intern to political director of Thurmond's re-election campaign. Atwater remembers listening to a man who embodied for him the virtues of Southern conservatism, economic libertarianism, a strong military, opposition to federal interference. Both men insist that the historical identification of Thurmond with the segregation is unfair. The issue, then as now, Thurmond insists, was states' rights. And there's a couple of things about that. First off, the discrepancy between his frat brother's story and his mom's story, I think, is easy to reconcile. I think his frat brother got the year wrong, which is easy to do decades later. I think his grades were shitty, probably in his sophomore year. And I think his mom got him this internship because he needed summer credit to not get kicked out of school, and she pulled another favor. That's kind of my way of reconciling this. But also, there's a good documentary about Lee Atwater, and it covers... It interviews a lot of his friends at the time, and a couple of different people who knew him will say variations of the same thing, which is that he didn't believe in conservatism. He was not ideologically, he could have worked for either party and been just as happy, but he saw there was more of a place for him in the Republican Party, in part because the Republican Party at the start of the 70s is a party in massive transition. One of the things that has happened is that they have bled young people, and Lee has an idea for getting young people to join the party. And there's just more of an opportunity because the party is in flux, because they're realigning. He can find a place for himself there. And the Democratic Party, he can't find as much of a place for himself there. It would be harder to insert himself and make a name for himself. And so some of the people who knew Lee will argue that's the only reason why he gets involved in the Republican Party, is that this is where he can make a name for himself. And that's the only thing he actually cares about, right? whatever the case, because in that version of events, he doesn't give a shit that Strom Thurmond is an economic libertarian and loves a strong military. He just, again, this is a guy he can, because he's kind of disgraced and whatnot, I can get involved in it, and I've got an in. This is where my in is. It'll be easiest for me to succeed here.
I mean, yeah, he seems more interested in music and performance, like on like a personal level than like politics, even though he enjoys the process of it. And it seemed like he had saw more opportunity for innovative work and having fun with the process in the Republican Party at the time compared to the Democratic Party.
Right. And the process is what he cares about. So who gives a shit what the politics he's fighting for are,
We need we need him. We need one of him for the left.
We sure do. You get that from some of his friends who are like, "Can you? If only he had picked the other party. We might have all been better off."
We're going to be looking for a Lee Atwater of the left.
That's what we need. Not a fucking Joe Rogan, a Lee Atwater, somebody who can fucking play hardball. At any rate, every version of the Lee Atwater story is consistent that at this time, Strom Thurmond his time with Thurmond causes him to take his life seriously, right? And he's a different guy when he comes back to school. 1972, the year after his internship, is an election year, and Atwater is determined to do his part to get Richard Nixon reelected. He realized that frat boys are Nixon's natural candidacy, and he starts using frat parties and events to sign up other young men to register as Republicans and support Nixon. And this expands to he runs a large get-out-the-vote effort in South Carolina and signs up 12,000 people. This is a feat no one gets close to equaling. No single person gets close to equaling in this period of time. Like, Lee is head and shoulders above anyone else in terms of like their ability to do that.
That's a lot of people for an election at this time.
Yes, that's a big deal. And this is what drives Lee to do it in the first place, right? It's not dedication to Nixon. It's a desire to prove himself the best, to get the most, to break the record, right? I've signed up the most people. That's what is appealing to him, is it's a way he can win and set himself up as special. His frat brother, Carlos Evans, claimed, "I would say the thing that really made him different was that he was incredibly competitive. He was very much focused on winning at every level." Lee's performance was so shocking and noteworthy that he earned the attention of the Republican Party itself. In 1973, the next year, as a result of this feat, he is appointed National Director of the College Republicans by Party Chairman George H.W. Bush.
And this fucking guy.
Yeah. And this is, unfortunately, H.W. Bush has picked his man well, because Lee is really good at this. Like, the number of registered, college-age Republicans increases massively.
He's organizing and polarizing.
After this period of time. He is really good at this. He's going all around different campuses. He's giving speeches. He is very good at getting young men. And again, he's this very modern figure of... It's this mix of crude humor and misogyny and kind of veiled racism that he's using to get these young men be like, no, you don't want to do this hippie bullshit and vote for the left. You want to your interests are being served by the Republican Party as a young man, right? That's who you need to be with. And he's very good at this. And that's the first couple of years of Lee's political career, is reforming and turning college Republicans into a major force, right? And there's a lot of butting heads. He has a lot of direct competition and winds up in a lot of ugly fights with other people that he always wins. Anyone who kind of challenges him for power, he beats the absolute piss out of, because he's just extraordinarily good at this sort of thing. Which is, it's just great. You love to see this kind of shit. Before we discuss Lee's meteoric rise and what happens after this point, I should peel back and give y'all a little refresher on how Republican Party politics evolved from the 50s to the start of the 70s, which is, the course of Lee's life to date, right? This is during the period of time from when he is born to when he starts being a political actor himself. Traditionally, Republicans, the party of Lincoln, held the North, and the South was a Democratic stronghold. And that had started changing dramatically in the early 20th century, which is often summarized as the two parties basically switching platforms. The reality is a lot more complex, but by the time FDR comes around, this realignment is well underway, right? And this leaves Republicans in a bind. Southern Democrats now felt alienated from the rest of the party, but the main way to reach them was with racism. And every year it got harder to just say, I hate black people and win an election. Enter the Southern strategy. The gist of the Southern strategy is that you advertise policies that hurt black people and maybe help white people, that part's not actually necessary, without saying that's why you're doing it. Now, there's a lot of debate over how much of a role the Southern strategy in particular plays in this post-Civil Rights Act realignment, because this starts in the early 20th century, but it's after the 57 Civil Rights Act that the realignment really speeds up and that like the Democratic Party really loses the South. Like that's when all that really happens. And so it's, there's debate and valid debate by political historians over like how much credit do we give the Southern strategy as opposed to these other things that are going on at the time. The phrase itself, the Southern strategy, gets popular after 1970 when Nixon political strategist Kevin Phillips gives an interview for the New York Times in which he says, among other things, from now on, the Republicans are never going to get more than 10 to 20% of the Negro vote, and they don't need any more than that. The party's political future, he argued, was in making sure Southern whites saw Democrats as the party of black people. This would convince them to switch parties and vote Republican, right? And again, we can debate how much of a factor this is in the realignment and, what happens to the South and it becoming a Republican stronghold, but it's certainly a big part of it, right?
Totally.
And Lee Atwater he's going to start getting into politics literally like a year or two after this Nixon strategist has laid out the whole strategy on like in this interview. And this is always going to be a part of his understanding of how politics works, right? Now, one of his early political triumphs is when he's still like with the college Republicans. There's a contest, there's an election to see who's going to be chairman of the college Republicans between Karl Rove and a guy named Robert Edgeworth. Karl Rove, a lot of you millennials will know, he was George Bush's campaign manager during Bush's campaigns. Like he's the guy who got W elected. He's famous as being a slime. Just look at a picture of Karl Rove. He looks like he's slithered in on a slime trail. No man has ever looked more like a snail than Karl fucking Rove. Like touching him, his skin has the consistency of wet Play-Doh. You can just tell it by looking at a picture. Sophie, pull the fucker up.
I see him.
You see him? You're seeing him, Gare?
I got him.
He's beautiful.
I got
he's
a face
beautiful,
full of
isn't he?
right now.
Yeah, he's just a majestic animal.
Very smooth skin.
Incredibly smooth guy, just in terms of his actual texture. And to quote from an article in PBS's website, quote, Rove lost, but Atwater mounted an appeal of Edgeworth's victory. The contest was ultimately decided by then Republican National Committee Chairman George H.W. Bush, who gave the election to Rove. That was a pretty early lesson for Karl Rove from Lee, says Joe Conason of The Nation and Salon.com, that you could play the hardest of hardball and get away with it. And what Atwater is doing here is he just starts challenging individual votes, and he just keeps coming up with, and they're bullshit challenges. Like the other guy had won, but he creates enough doubt that he's able to create space for Bush to come in and just decide the election. It's kind of a version of what the Supreme Court will do for W in 2000.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
The fact that this is how Karl Rove gets his start in politics, and this is very similar to what happens to W in 2000, not a coincidence. It's cool stuff. I'm glad that started, right? Yeah, it's really depressing. So Lee Atwater, in the early to mid 70s, is a chief acolyte and practitioner of the Southern strategy. He's this huge figure in getting the college Republicans organized, and he graduates from that to being a campaign, he's like a mercenary campaign strategist and aide or whatnot. Like you'll bring him on if you need a dirty tricks guy, and he proved himself incredibly good at that. One of his first big jobs in 1978 is working as an advisor to Strom Thurmond's re-election campaign. It's here he would notch his first major victory. The guy that Thurmond is running against is Charles Ravenel, who the Times described as the then rising young star of Charleston politics. Lee set himself to the task of strangling Ravenel's career in the cradle. Through relentless digging, he came across a quote from Ravenel in this is how he describes it. He finds like an interview in a small weekly newspaper called Manhattan East, quoting Charles Ravenel as having told a Park Avenue fundraiser that if elected, he'd be the third senator from New York. And you see the quote is him basically saying like, I know I'm running, in South Carolina, but if I get elected, if you donate and help me get elected, I'll vote like a senator from New York.
This shouldn't
be
legal.
Right. Now, Ravenel denies ever saying this. There's no actual evidence that he says this. And the rumor is that Atwater planted the story. He either bribed a reporter or an editor to put an article in this tiny paper with minimal circulation because it didn't need to get read by people. It just needed to be something he could grab and then like read out and have put in attack ads, right?
Yeah, he can turn it into a problem.
Right. And this quote becomes the single most repeated claim in Thurman's attack ads against Ravenel. And again, I can't tell you to a point of certainty that he planted that story, but if he did, it wasn't the only time he did that in a 1978 election. Because that same year, he also consulted on a House of Representatives race for his old friend Carol Campbell. This is, we talked about their friendship. They were buddies in high school. And their competition
of
for this...
soup fame.
Yeah, of soup fame, of the Campbell's fortune. Their competition is a guy named Max Heller. At the time, Max Heller was the mayor of Greenville. He was also Jewish and a literal Holocaust survivor, right? He had narrowly survived the Holocaust. Oh, yeah. This is going in such a dark direction. Per the New York Times, Atwater's accusers claim that as an informal advisor to Campbell, he passed secret polling information to Don Sprouse, a third-party candidate, who then used the information to undermine Heller's campaign. Political analyst Alan Barron has revealed that Campbell's pollster in 1978, Arthur J. Finkelstein of Irvington, New York, told him that his data showed South Carolina voters would reject a foreign-born Jew who did not believe in Jesus Christ as the savior. Marvin Chernoff, a Democratic consultant in Columbia, claims that Atwater specifically told him of passing Finkelstein's secret poll to Sprouse. And Atwater denies this, but Sprouse is literally going up to Max Heller and being like, do you believe in Jesus as our Lord and Savior? And saying, I think at one point he basically asked, like, did the Jews crucify Jesus? Like, it's really anti-Semitic shit. Yeah. And this is not Campbell. That's not the guy that Atwater's working for. It's this third party who he is using to put this racist stuff out so that voters are thinking, well, this guy's not really a Christian, right? And they're not tying Campbell to the anti-Semitism. So he gets the best of both worlds. It comes from a different
origin, yeah.
Right. And this is the way Atwater works, right? And, he denies this. There's significant evidence in a number of people who tie him to this happening. Sure. Finkelstein and all of the Campbell's campaign staffers deny the accusations too, but Campbell's campaign manager has since admitted to a late-night meeting with Sprouse representatives in a Greenville parking lot before the election, and the Finkelstein poll released by Campbell did ask voters to compare how they would feel about a race between a Jewish immigrant and a native South Carolinian.
Oh, that's good.
Again,
that's expert stuff.
This is all very, very Lee Atwater shit, right? And if true, these allegations are just entirely consistent with what we've already seen from Lee. In high school, this is the guy who's making up fake polls to swing elections. Atwater is also engaging during the 78 election in more skullduggery on Thurman's behalf, right, to help the segregationist senator shake off some of the bad PR from his constant public racism. And this really shows you how smart Atwater is. His solution to the problem of Thurman being a famous racist is very innovative. He has campaign representatives announce that they're throwing all of their efforts into getting out the black vote. Thurman goes so far as to send his 6-year-old daughter to an integrated public school. So it looks like Thurman's really trying to reform his image and get black people to vote for him, but they know that's not going to work. This is a feint, right? Black people are not going to vote for Strom Thurmond, and Atwater knows it. But Ravenel's campaign, he knows, is going to panic when they see Thurmond going out for this vote, and they're going to redouble their efforts to get the black vote.
To get the black vote, which is already going to go to them. Yeah.
And that's number one. They're not focusing then on the other votes they need to get. And also it's going to convince the white voters, who is really who the primary amount of Atwater's PR is going out towards, that well, this other guy is campaigning for black people.
He only cares
doesn't
about
care
the black
about
vote.
white people, right?
Yeah.
That's the strategy, and it works perfectly. A Democratic Party operative at the time summarized the result. The Ravenel campaign looked like it spent all its time going after black voters. While swing voters are turned off, they vote for Thurmond, and he retains his seat. So yeah, that's where we are at 1978. Lee's gotten his political career off to a rousing start.
Yeah, that's a smart operation.
It's a smart operation. Evil, but smart. Speaking of evil but smart, the sponsors of our podcast, all very evil, but all geniuses. So why fight them, Just let it happen to you.
If you can't beat them.
If you can't beat them, take their money. And we're back. So by 1980, Lee Atwater's got himself a reputation, not as a great political thinker or even as like the best campaign strategist, but as a connoisseur of dirty tricks. And so wherever a Republican is in trouble, he is increasingly the guy they call for, or increasingly the guy the RNC sends their way to set off a couple of bombs, right? He is their secret weapon. Like, we can deploy Lee anywhere we need some extra help, and we're willing to be unethical with it, right? Like,
they just airdrop him in.
Yes.
With
He's the
parachutes.
82nd Airborne of being a scummy political
Takes off his
campaign
flight
manager.
suit, has a black suit underneath, briefcase
right.
ready to go.
Ready to go. For example, in the 1980 South Carolina congressional race, he was brought in to do push polling for Representative Floyd Spence. Spence was running against former state senator Tom Turnipseed. That is a real name.
Wow.
I just really got to focus on that for a second.
I have heard of Tom Turnipseed before.
Yes, Tom Turnipseed.
It's a name you can't forget.
It's impossible to forget Tom Turnipseed. Now, as a child, when he's like a teenage boy, Tom has depression and he has to undergo shock therapy, like electroshock therapy for his depression. Which is, I think, probably was unnecessary at the time, but it's also a not uncommon treatment at the time, and obviously not something he has any choice in because he's a child. Not that this should be stigmatizing, but I don't think, like, it's often unnecessary when it's given in this period of time for stuff like this. Tom had discussed this in public. He had been open about the fact that as a kid, he struggled with mental health and he went through this kind of treatment. This is a thing he talked about because he admirably, I think, wanted to destigmatize mental health treatment. And unfortunately, this is going to make him incredibly vulnerable to Lee Atwater. So, at the same time that Lee picks up on the fact that Tom's undergone electroshock therapy, he finds out that Tom is a member of the NAACP and has been a civil rights activist.
Started off as a segregationist and then saw the light, I guess.
Yeah, he's been good for a while on it, and Lee is going to frame this as he's a radical leftist black supremacist, right? He gets anonymous guys to do push calls, or push polls where they're saying, are you comfortable voting for like a man with ties to the NAACP, who's like a radical civil rights activist? And at the same time, are you comfortable voting for a man who received electroshock therapy for his severe mental illness?
Yeah,
now,
okay. All right, buddy.
On its own, that's not enough to spin the election because push polls only reach so many people. So he's got a question of how do I launder the electroshock therapy thing into becoming a central campaign issue without looking evil, looking like I'm trying to do it. And Atwater finds a solution. He finds a couple of reporters. He's giving a press conference and he's talking with a couple of reporters before the press conference. And he brings up the electroshock therapy thing in order to be like, basically say, you should ask me about this, right? He's planting the question in their heads, right? So they ask him about this, and he gives an answer, and they ask him something else about Tom Turnipseed, and he responds being like, I'm not going to respond to allegations made by someone who's been hooked up to jumper cables, right? Like, that's the way he frames this. Like, he gets this brought up so that he can say, I don't have to answer questions from a man who got hooked up to jumper cables.
He has this retort pre-planned, and this was all a scheme just to say that.
He sets up the questions so that he can give that answer, right?
Yeah.
So Turnipseed loses, and Lee's dirty tricks are often given some of the blame. Now, when I was doing my research, I was curious as to how Atwater planted questions with the press, and it seems like he had a few different ways of doing this. But what surprised me was that he would openly acknowledge to the journalists that he used this way after doing so. This is a quote from an article by Eleanor Randolph in the New York Times. Lee Bandy, a respected political journalist for the state newspaper in South Carolina, recalled the time he accidentally helped one of Mr. Atwater's candidates, the former Governor Ronald Reagan of California. Later, Mr. Bandy recalled that Lee laughed and said, "Bandy, you got used." So he celebrates this. He likes being like he wants you to know when he's done this. For one thing, he's proud of it, right?
It's like he can't help himself.
No. Now, Lee's main gig in 1980 was working as the Southern Regional Coordinator for Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign. At this point, the Southern strategy had been named for at least a decade and practiced for much longer. But Lee had notes, and he suggested a revision to his bosses. After getting nominated, he urged, Reagan should start his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And before this, by the way, he does like a fuck job on Bush. Like he's helping Reagan kind of win the primary against Bush, which is going to like piss off Bush a bit, but it's just not as interesting as his crimes against less deserving people.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because like Reagan's a performer. So
Reagan's a performer, right? So after getting nominated, he urges Reagan to start his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And if you look at videos from this, it's just white people in the crowd, right? And his point to doing this is to like he's basically got a revamped version of the Southern strategy. Writing for The Nation, Antonio D'Ambrosio describes this as a not so subtle attempt to make race a central part of Reagan's presidential bid. It worked. In an article for the Othering and Belonging Institute at Berkeley, John Powell goes into more detail. They did so, revamp the Southern strategy, but not only by criticizing federal civil rights legislation and impugning federal desegregation orders, but by railing against busing, government dependency, and welfare, or by espousing such seemingly race-neutral ideas as states' rights and local control as signals to preserve Jim Crow from federal intrusion. Even without making explicitly racist comments, the dog whistle was clearly heard by those who were its intended recipients. These strategies, combined called the Southern Strategy, was designed to create a national Republican majority, built in part on white resentment. The dog whistle worked because it was heard and understood by the conservative white base, yet not by more moderate and northern whites. It meant activating racial resentment for one part of the population while denying that fact to the rest. The Southern strategy married the conservative politics' antipathy to marginal tax rates and civil rights, labor and environmental regulations, to corporate entities with culturally conservative antipathy towards civil rights, women's rights, and gay rights.
And we've been stuck here ever since.
Yeah, this is a huge success. And to be clear, I'm not giving Lee Atwater all of the credit for Reagan winning. He doesn't deserve it. He's not the main guy leading the campaign, but he has a significant role in the South, and he's a big part of. He like convinces him to do his to do that first big meeting in Mississippi. He has a major role in shaping how Reagan campaigns. Right. And it's worth debating how integral was he to Reagan's ultimate victory in his first term. But people within the party certainly saw him as having played a significant role because he gets a job in the White House. Right. And he basically has to have one created for him. And there's fighting against this because a lot of people don't trust him because he's the dirty tricks guy.
Yeah. Why would you want the dirty tricks guy in the White House?
Right. But they create basically an entry-level position for him where he's like White House deputy political director. Right. That's the job that he gets under Reagan. Now, in 1981,
so he's one of the supporting characters in Veep.
Yes, he's like, but he's also a kind of a mastermind behind the scenes because he starts scheming as soon as he gets into this job. We'll talk about that. But in 1981, just as he's settling into the White House, a political scientist at Case Western Reserve University named Alex Lamis reaches out to Lee. Lamis is one of the first people outside of the Republican Party who noticed that Atwater's not just another consultant willing to get his hands dirty, but he's someone who's changing the way the game is played. He's someone with like a generational understanding of how politics works that is shifting the way politics is done. The interview is part
by playing the game the way he does, he's actually
right.
changing the fundamental rules of the game.
Yes, exactly. And this guy Lamis is one of the first people to realize it, and he interviews Lee. And it's kind of part on and part off the record, but all of it's recorded. And this recording gives us a fascinating insight. This is the thing that's famous about Lee is this quote of him explaining the Southern strategy in this interview. If you've ever read about it, you've read that quote of Lee Atwater. And for a long time, people didn't know, is this really Lee or not? Because like the name kind of was out there. This interviewer had basically claimed it, but like no one was proof. There was no proof until fairly recently when the audio got released, and now you can hear him, which we're going to hear in a little bit. But the interview gives like a really fascinating insight into Lee's expectations on the future of progress and how he talked about stuff like racism in politics. He asserts in the interview, "My generation will be the first generation of Southerners that won't be prejudiced." And this seems rich coming from a guy who repeatedly campaigned on race, right?
Yeah.
But Atwater's argument is that, no, I did a lot to get guys like Thurman to shut up about the Civil Rights and Voting Act and just focus on fiscal conservatism and cutting social programs and the like, right?
And
stuff
and
that
welfare.
hurts, right?
Yeah.
His argument is that the Southern strategy is actually a step forward because you're hiding the racism, right? And there's a degree of, I don't know if it's shame or guilt that he has when talking about how the Southern strategy works. Because Landis basically asked him, like, how do you square this belief that Southerners aren't racist with this whole strategy based on racism? And Lee gives this answer that's going to become super famous, one of those famous quotes in the history of U.S. politics. And he prefaces it by saying, now, y'all aren't going to quote me on this, right?
Jesus.
When they assure him they aren't, and they kind of don't. But anyway, here's what he says. We're going to play you the famous quote. This is the actual audio of Lee saying it. There's a good chance you've read this, but yeah.
Yeah, now y'all aren't quoting me on this. All right, I won't do it. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me?
I don't know if that's true, Lee. It's interesting, though, that he kind of seems like he has to believe that like this awful racist strategy is justified because like we're doing away with more racism than we're embracing, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, does he view this as like a form of like progress in a way? I mean, I guess he kind of does. That's part of what he's outlining in the clip.
Yeah.
But the effect is still the same.
Right. And that's it's an open question. Does he really think that that he's actually reduced racism at all? Does he really think that this is better in that way? Or is this just what he wants this academic to believe because he doesn't want to have the legacy of a racist, right?
Well, at least he wasn't quoted on that.
At least he wasn't quoted on that until now. And yeah, I think that's a good point to end. We'll be doing 3 parts this week, so you'll get them all this week, folks. A new next episode on Thursday. Garrison, anything you want to plug before we close out for the day?
Well, our show It Could Happen Here, which you're also on, Robert, and our weekly news roundup on It Could Happen Here called Executive Disorder, which now has its own special feed.
Yeah.
Which we've been working on for a long time, a whole bunch of different series that myself, James, Stout, and Robert has put together, have their own feeds on It Could Happen Here now, so it's easier to find episodes all in the same, following the same story, like Myanmar, Cop City, and also Executive Disorder. So yeah, that's the main thing. Also, I occasionally tell a mix of humor and jokes based on terrorism at a bar in Brooklyn that you can, if you know, you know. If you're a gay person in Brooklyn, you can figure it out.
Oh, there you go. Go find Garrison in Brooklyn, or maybe don't do that.
Jesus, Robert.
Do something. Do something. Yeah. Even if it's bad, as long as you're taking action, that's all that matters. It's okay if it's evil.
I feel like you're really internalizing. Lee's
the Lee Atwater strategy.
Yes.
Hurt as many people as you want, as long as you're doing something. Anything to quiet the sound of your brother screaming as he boils alive in oil.
Christ.
You do have to keep remembering that every one of these things he's doing, whenever you look at Lee, he's just like smiling blankly at you. You have to imagine in his head the only sound going on instead of static, it's just his brother screaming as he dies. Good stuff.
I am excited that at the bottom of this page in the script, where we're gonna get some Black, Manafort, and Stone.
Oh yeah, You did call it, Garrison. Roger Stone is a key part of this story. Yes, all that and more.
Things to look forward to, my friends.
Part trace. All right, everybody, get off the internet now.